All right. So this week, part of what we're talking about is what is science? What does science mean? What does it mean to do science? And so for me, actually, before Francis Bacon, this was my introduction to science. Bill Nye telling me that science rules every Friday afternoon. And the way that Bill presented science was that it was this sort of super fascinating, filled with explosions and lots of cool stuff. And don't get me wrong, it often is, and science does in fact rule. But pretty often it's a little bit less exciting than Bill made it seem, unfortunately. But science is still super awesome and really fantastic. You just can't expect there to be uh, explosions and making cool stuff all the time. There is actually a process. There's actually a procedure to it. So um, this is Francis Bacon in 1620 or so, I believe. He actually formalized the process of science. He wrote down, hey, if you want to learn stuff about the world, if you want to learn stuff about nature, here are some steps that you should follow in order to do that in an efficient and repeatable and philosophically true, I guess, way. So here is the slightly distorted steps of the scientific method. I'm going to post the link to this free online textbook that we're going to be using. And this is figure 1.18. Hopefully you can see these arrows here. But the scientific method always begins with an observation. You notice some phenomena or you read about some phenomena and you want to learn more about it. So after you have your observation, the next thing you're going to do is ask a question. What caused it to be that way? Followed by forming a hypothesis that potentially answers your question. Okay? And I'm going to give an example here briefly. But after your hypothesis, you make a prediction based on the hypothesis, and then you do an experiment to test that prediction. After you've run the experiment, you analyze the results, and your hypothesis is either supported or not supported. When that's all done, you report your results. Okay, so an example of this is I have a niece, and let's say, for instance, she comes to me with her toy car and says, "Uncle Aaron, my toy car is broken." So that's the observation: is the car doesn't go. Then we have to form a question about this, which maybe would be like, well, why doesn't the car go? Then you would hypothesize. You would say, well, I think the car doesn't go because the batteries are dead. All right, so observation, car doesn't work. Question, well, why the heck doesn't the car work? The hypothesis is the batteries are dead, therefore the car doesn't work. And the prediction that is based on this is, I predict if we change the batteries out on this toy car, then it will go. The experiment then is, well, you change the batteries out. Then we analyze the results. The way I would analyze this is I look and see, is Katie crying or not? If she's not, the analysis, Katie's happy, she's off playing with her car. The analysis leads me to the results that the batteries are dead in the car. And reporting this results might just be saying to my brother, hey man, Katie's car goes through batteries really fast. All right. So again, the process of science always begins with an observation, then a question, then a hypothesis, then a prediction, then an experiment, then the results, and then you report those results. This process can be redundant sometimes, and certain people will leave out certain steps. I wanted to talk about a real life example here. and that is this paper that came out last year talking about your blood type and whether or not you are susceptible to COVID-19. And the conclusion that these researchers came to was that if you have a certain blood type, you are more likely to get coronavirus or SARS-CoV-2. Shortly thereafter, though, another paper came out and said, well, actually, no, that's not necessarily true, guys. You need to do something else because we got completely different results. And so then you ask yourself, does this paradigm work? And the answer is yes, and that is because of the process of peer review. So here, the diagram in the book just shows, hey, if your hypothesis is not supported, try again. Okay, but you can actually get further than that before you need to try again, because what happens in the process of peer review is basically what scientists are doing is they're giving it to other researchers in the field and saying, hey, look at this. Did we do everything right? Are our conclusions correct? And what the other researchers will do is they'll say, yep, that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and publish it. And then once they publish it, maybe another scientist picks it up and says, hey, I tried this again, and your conclusions are incorrect. Back to the drawing board. What you've said is not true. And so what happens is that the sort of integrity of science can be protected through this process of peer review. It can be protected by people redoing the research and making sure what other folks have said is accurate and correct and good science. Okay, so you go through, you have observation, you question your hypothesis, prediction, experiment, you analyze your results, whether or not your hypothesis is supported, actually you report those results, and then sometimes somebody else will go through and find, hey, you made a mistake, okay? And that is the process of peer review. So let me ask you this question. What was their theory in that paper behind the ABO blood typing? What was their theory about blood type and COVID? And actually, that's a trick question because they didn't have a theory. They had a hypothesis, right? So the point I wanted to make here is that theory and hypothesis are not the same idea. A theory is it's an idea that is a well-supported notion. So there have been many, many tests backing up this theory that explain sort of a broad category of phenomena in nature, which is big language for basically saying theories explain things in nature and have never been shown to be false. So a great example of a theory, apart from the one that you guys are probably all thinking, which is evolution, but like the germ theory of disease, which is the notion that disease is caused by these tiny particles. Or cell theory is another good example within biology, which is the idea that all life is made up of cells. Okay, so a theory is not the same thing as a hypothesis. And I guess I should mention that a law is an explanation of some phenomena, but it doesn't tell you why. So like Newtonian gravity says that all objects are accelerating toward the Earth, but it doesn't explain. Newton never told us why this was happening. He just said, hey, this is happening. Whereas when it comes to evolution, Darwin actually explained, hey, natural selection is happening, which is causing these variations among populations. It's causing populations to change. Neither here nor there. We're going to talk about evolution later, but what I'd like you to know is that a theory is not the same thing as a hypothesis. I'd like you to also know the steps of the scientific method, and I think we're going to have maybe a little discussion about how you can apply the scientific method to your everyday life. So in our next lecture, if you're watching these in order, we're going to spend some time going through and talking about pseudoscience. What is pseudoscience? Can you trust it? No. And how can you avoid it?